Welcome to the City of Palaca Historic Preservation Board meeting. Today is December 3rd, 2020. We're going to start with a call to order for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. And who will be doing the invocation?
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Father in heaven, we're grateful for this day, for the opportunity we have to meet together as stewards over the historic preservation of Palaca. We're grateful unto thee for this opportunity and pray that thou would be with us, bless us, and help us have the gift of discernment, and we might be able to be wise stewards. Bless those who are in need this time of year, whether it be sickness or emotional health or physical health. Buoy them up and keep them safe, we pray. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Richard, could you start the pledge, please? Pledge of allegiance?
Want to do the pledge?
Yes.
Can we say it? It's only been 40 years, but I'll say it. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, we're going to have a swearing-in ceremony, and for Laura, Linda is not here today. I guess we will do that in the future.
All right. Would you like me to be on this side? Or please? Sorry, I'm walking toward you in front of you. Ms. Schomburger, would you raise your right hand and place your other hand on the Bible, please? And if you don't mind repeating after me. I, Laura Schomburger,
I, Laura Schoenberger,
a Historic Preservation Board appointee,
Historic Board Preservation Board appointee
the Palaca City Commission,
of the Palaca City Commission,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully perform
that I will faithfully perform
the duties of my appointed office
the duties of my appointed office
and will support and honor,
and will support and honor,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
all applicable laws of the state of Florida,
all applicable laws of the state of Florida,
Putnam County,
Putnam County,
the city of Palaca,
City of Palaca,
as well as the beliefs,
as well as the beliefs,
vision, mission,
vision, mission,
policies, procedures,
policies, procedures,
code of ethics,
code of ethics,
and code of conduct
and code of conduct
of the City of Palaca Historic Preservation Board.
of the City of Palaca Historic Preservation Board.
I hereby, through this oath,
I hereby, through this oath,
affirm that I will perform
affirm that I will perform
the duties of this public trust
the duties of this public trust
in a fair, equitable, and ethical
in a fair, equitable, and ethical
manner befitting the dignity
manner befitting the dignity
and responsibilities of the office.
and responsibilities of the office.
Thank you, Ms. Schomburger.
Thank you.
New millennium.
Could we have roll call, please?
Roberta Correa,
Present.
Richard Stackpole,
Yes.
Elizabeth Van Rensburg,
Present.
Linda Lettle Craybill is not present for the record. Laura Schomburger,
Present.
Larry Beaton,
Here by video.
Mary Rees.
Here.
That ends roll call at this time, Chair.
Thank you. Appeal, I'm going to read the appeal, and ex parte will ask for about ex parte communications. Any person aggrieved by a decision of the board may, within 15 days thereafter, apply to the city commission for review of the board's decision. Such application must be filled with the city manager in writing. Objections by property owners to National Register nominations must be notarized to be included in the record, section 54-4-74 Palaca Muni Code. Any person wishing to appeal any decision made by the Historic Preservation Board with respect to any matter considered at such meeting will need a record of the proceedings, and for such purpose may need to ensure that a verbatim record of the proceedings is made, which record includes the testimony and evidence upon which the appeal is to be based. Borough Statute 286-0105. Ex parte communication. Anybody have any ex parte communication regarding the issue on the agenda? Please. I can say during the recent special planning board meeting, I did submit a comment in the chat column, not realizing this was going to be on a future agenda, so I just want to make that clear for the record. Approval of minutes. Did everybody have an opportunity to review the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up to public comments, general public comments, not specific to the agenda item. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. Okay, Sonny, it says message from me. I'm supposed to answer.
Deborah, do we have any public comments at this time?
Okay,
Not at this time.
public comments from the floor. Hello? Yes. Oh, okay, no problem, John. John, do you want to, are you calling specifically about the agenda item? Okay, well, go ahead. We might as well just,
You will need to put it on speaker, Madam Chair.
yes, please. 1 minute. It's going to be put on speaker, John.
Madam Chair, make sure whoever the speaker is, they identify themselves
Yes, I
and give their address, please.
Hi, John. Could you please give your name and address for the record?
Sure, John Boat, 220 South 4th Street.
Thank you. And limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
As it stands, we already have enough of this. I mean, this will go on the books. Don't need a new one. We need to comply with the ones we have in place. One of the functions of the historic board is to maintain visual appropriateness and aesthetics. Approval of this change would absolutely be a negative for our historic districts. By keeping our current unique codes in effect, our historic board will have the opportunity to view requests on a case-by-case basis as they have been. This is something that works. Let's not break it. This would create another negative visual aspect to the districts. We have available paths in place by the request of the variance. By circumventing the variance process, adopting a new law, is not in the best interest of our residents. Obsolete nonconformances are ever present in historic neighborhoods. Some call it charm, some call it painful. The choice upon the purchase. The historical districts are unique, and let's keep it that way. Please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Tony Harwell is on line 3.
On line 2? 3. Sorry. Hello? Please give your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello?
Tony Harwell, 215 Dodge Street. This is a discussion about the parking. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, just wanted to agree with what Mr. Boat said, 100%. What you have before you today is 3 options. And there are some problems with those options. As far as number 2, the talk about having the allowance of being able to park in the backyard, but there's nothing in the code that says anything about having to be able to park in the backyard. Just want to make you aware of that. And also, without about having a driveway or garage. There's nothing in code that says you have to have a garage or a driveway. So if you were to look into thinking about using number 2, there's too many things that just conflict with the code that just doesn't allow anything to happen right, and there's just too many conflicts. One of for instance, you're allowed to park anywhere in your front yard, not your required front yard, but your front yard that's beyond your setback, and your side yards and your backyard, and also you're able to build to your 5-foot setbacks in R1 zoning. So say if somebody wanted to come in and build a new house, and they go right to their 5-foot setbacks, that means they're automatically allowed to park in the right of way if number 2 is approved. This can't happen. That's another conflict. I had submitted some drawings. I don't know if the board got them.
Yes, we have those, and once we get to this agenda item, it will be shared with the board. We're still in just general public comments, and so once we get to that on the agenda, Mr. Harwell will share that.
Okay, I can call back and discuss it then too.
That might be easier. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do that. Thanks.
Okay. Hello?
Hello.
Could you please give your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes?
Yes. I want to thank all of you for your presence today and service to the betterment of the city. I am Pam Garrett, and I live in Flagler County. My family has owned commercial property in the city at 110 Highway 19 South since 1977 and to the present. I previously lived at 603 Emmett in the South Historic District for 3 years, which my family purchased in 1991. My mother and father restored it to its current use in a B&B, which is now the Green Gables Inn, operated by its current owners who purchased it in 2016. I have followed written emails to Mr. Holmes and talked with him about parking, code enforcement issues during August and September 2020. I have copied other city employees who are responsible for code enforcement. I was born and raised in Palatka and always seek resolution that presents it in its best light. Citizens should realize that prospective property owners and visitors are not coming to see strip malls or seek the hottest shopping in North Florida. They're coming to partake of its unique river beauty, terrain, historic treasures, and friendly people. Unfortunately, property owners in the historic area report that prospective buyers come through looking to purchase one of the historic homes, but leave appalled at the lack of code enforcement and blight concerning these irreplaceable historic treasures. I have researched what is usual and customary practices in progressive cities seeking renewal and preservation of their historic areas and districts. Where residential parking is needed in their historic areas by homeowners or guests, it is addressed by allowing parking on the street along the curb. Parking is not aesthetically pleasing or allowed on the right-of-way, being a grassy area between the curb and sidewalk. Concrete parking pads are not allowed in front of homes. Examples of best practice parking in historic districts can be seen in the nation's oldest city, St. Augustine, Florida, where homeowners are given a reserved space in front of their homes parallel to the curb. Another issue that comes to mind that I've witnessed in the South Historic District specifically is vehicles, boats, skiffs, etc. parked in the front yards of historic homes. This is extremely offensive practice. Code should not allow the parking of such large commercial or work vehicles on residential property or the right-of-way. The owners of such large commercial, work, or recreational vehicles should be required to find parking and storage in an appropriate facility. This is an extremely offensive practice. Such occurrences present Palatka in the worst manner and elicit negative views and comments from many visitors and those seeking to buy historic or other properties. Residents of the historic areas give witness to these negative comments by visitors who summarily exit. With these code enforcement issues and non-conforming accepted parking practices, Palatka will never be viewed in a positive light regarding the presentation of its historic resources. A city's lack of action to remove these resources speaks loudly to all that it is not important to its leadership and citizens who will not speak up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public comments? It doesn't look like there's any more here via phone. Okay, we're going to close public comments and we'll go right into new business. Discussion direction regarding an ordinance amending section 94-261 of the Palatka Municipal Code pertaining to the location of parking facilities.
Phone off, the phone line off.
Please hit release, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, what?
Please hit release, Madam Chair.
Come over here, John. Let's go. Let's go. Sorry. 94, where I left off. Section 94-261 of the Palatka Municipal Code pertaining to location of parking facilities for existing residential structures. Mr. Holmes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Don Holmes, currently city manager of the city of Palatka. First, let me apologize for this, the interruptions and the I guess you'd say,
Lack of technical expertise by the chair?
well, no, not the lack of technical expertise by the chair, the cumbersome process that we're forced to use right now. Let me first, in my former life as an attorney, step back for a second and tell you that Mr. Beaton's presence is perfectly permissible by virtual means. As of November 1, as you may or may not know, the governor indicated that we cannot hold a meeting completely by virtual means. Prior to November 1 and after about March, during that time frame, there was an executive order issued that allowed us to count a quorum based upon people who attended by electronic means. But as of November 1, the governor rescinded or basically allowed that order to expire, so that now we have to have a quorum present in person, but people can still attend by virtual means. You have your quorum present in person, so Mr. Beaton is certainly allowed to participate by virtual means, and you are also allowed to receive comment by virtual means or electronic means. Secondly, let me tell you that, good Lord willing, and the creek doesn't rise, we will be improving this process very soon with some technological upgrades that will make it less cumbersome. It looks like we are in a new age. And I mean that in no sense other than to say that it looks like things are changing some. COVID has brought about some changes with people working from home and appearing in various ways by electronic or virtual means. So we're going to be upgrading our capabilities in the meeting room to try to eliminate some of the cumbersome processes that we're trying to use right now, which involve, of course, the telephone and the receptionist out front fielding calls and the dropped calls and all those things. We will hopefully in the next couple of weeks be in a little bit different position to handle these meetings. Then hopefully COVID will be a thing of the at least not as prominent a factor as it is now, and we can get back to something close to normal. The topic at hand is, of course, as you know, what I guess you'd say, parking in the right of way, for lack of a better term. There are a couple things that I need to mention before we start, and that is this. And these are just observations. One, there's a lot of talk about terms and things, and sometimes we may think that we understand what we're talking about, but from a technical perspective, maybe we don't. You can only have a variance if a code or a law provides for a variance. And then you can only allow by variance those things which your code say you can allow by variance, okay? So I hear the term variance used a lot, and I have for the last 44 years, where people say, well, you got a statute you don't like, you got a code you don't like, whatever it might be, just get a variance. Well, you can, if that code says that you can get a variance to eliminate the particular requirements of that code. But if the code doesn't provide for a variance and it doesn't tell you what things you can do by variance, then a variance isn't allowed. So for instance, you have a speed limit by ordinance, by statute. You can't just get a variance to change that speed limit unless you have a code that says that a board could adopt a different speed limit based on variance criteria. So when we talk about variances, you can do variances. Our code provides for variances, but it provides basically what items you can deviate from, and it provides criteria for deviation. And if it's not in the code, then you can't do a variance of a requirement just because. It's not a generic thing. Secondly, what we're here about today isn't code enforcement. We understand there's a need for us to deal with code enforcement, and trust me, we are committed to bringing about a new time in code enforcement in the city of Palatka. We also have to understand that there are about 4,500 homes in the city of Palatka that have utility connections, and we have one code enforcement officer. So unless there's going to be a huge pot of money found to fund a whole lot of other officers and staff, we're going to be limited in how many cases we can handle and how quickly we can handle them, but we are going to be handling cases. Now, lastly, the topic at hand is parking. First, I need to tell you that from staff's perspective, this isn't something that we are here to advocate. I mean, we're not here to tell you that we basically adopted a particular stance and we want you to go with it. We're here so that you can have input, which will then be provided to the city commission, actually the planning commission, I guess, next, and then the city commission on the topic that's at hand. And whichever way the city commission chooses to go, we're fine with. We just need direction. We're not trying to set policy or set statute or set ordinance, but on the other hand, it's obvious that there's a need for clarification. Right now, our code in section 94-261 has two relevant passages to the discussion at hand. The first one they're brief. The first one is found at 94-261 subsection C7, and it states, location of parking areas in required yards, subject to required buffer areas, required side and rear yards, but not required front yards, may be used for off-street parking in residential districts. Subject to required buffer areas, all required yards in commercial and industrial districts may be used for off-street parking. So in residential areas, bottom line is, by code right now, it is specified that you can't park in the front yard. You can't park in the side yard, you can't park in the rear yard. Now, that's the status of the code as we sit here right now.
Question. Is that the whole city of Palatka or just the historical district?
That's the whole city of Palatka. The second passage that's relevant is as follows. Except for the driveways, I apologize, I'm going to have to give you a cite. This is in 94-261, and it's subparagraph S5. And it says, except for the driveways, the area between the travelway of a street, road, or highway and the property line shall not be used for vehicular maneuvering or parking. That's the relevant portion, but the remainder of that paragraph reads, in order to minimize the number of drives necessary for proper access to the uses in this district, there should be joint use of drives by adjoining properties where possible. But the relevant portion to our discussion today is that first sentence, which reads, except for the driveways, the area between the travelways of a street, road, or highway and the property line shall not be used for vehicular maneuvering or parking. So basically, you can't park in the right of way.
In the buffer area.
No, sir, in the right of way, travel way between the street and the property line. In the right of way. So, it's not a secret that the matter was kind of brought to a head, and when the city was doing some repaving in the Southside Historic District, and it was noticed that there were people, and I can't give you pictures. I can only tell you that I'm advised that there were people who were parking in the right of way. Some of those people had driveways and garages and side yards and backyards, and some didn't. About 3, I'm told, didn't have side or backyards. Well, they can't park in the front yard by code, as the code exists right now. So that meant they could only park either on the street or illegally in the right of way. When the paving was going on, and I have said before, this goes under the heading of no good deed goes unpunished, the city, which I thought was reasonable. I didn't necessarily make the call, but when I was told of it, I didn't see anything unreasonable about it. Thought that rather than having people just parking on the dirt, jumping the curb and parking on the dirt, it would be preferable to have an aesthetically pleasing single parking space in front of those houses, at least, that didn't have the ability to park in a side or rear yard. You can't park in the front yard, you don't have a side yard, or you can't get through the side yard to the rear yard, so you have no place to park other than the right of way or the street. So about provision was made, or at least plans were made, for 3 parking pads, so to speak, as to those houses. And I think one additional one ended up being created, maybe by inadvertence, maybe not, but in any event. That began a series of complaints from people who said you shouldn't be allowed to park in the right of way. And truly, as I had just indicated to you, the code says you can't. So again, using logic, which apparently isn't shared by all, some of us thought that it was preferable to park in the right of way in an aesthetically pleasing design parking space. If you had no other place to park than parking on the street. Some of the streets are 16 feet wide. Theoretically, you get 2 people parking on opposite sides of the street in the street, you have a road blockage. Or you have someone getting out of a car, and if they're parked in the correct lane of travel, they get out of the car into traffic if they're driving the car at night in the rain or whatever. And that we thought could be a safety concern. So without trying to destroy the character of the neighborhood or anything else really, we thought that, again, preferable to creating those kinds of traffic hazards for those 3, at least those 3 houses that had no ability to park in the side or rear yard, it would be accommodating to provide for a reasonable single space parking in the right of way. But as I said, that started a whole different discussion of people who disagree. Now, personally, I don't live in the Southside Historic District. I don't own property there. I have no preference as to whether this is or isn't allowed. There may be a health safety concern, but I don't know that it's one that's so overriding so that the city would want to take a hard stand. Then again, I'm not the city commission and I don't make the decision. So as we began getting differing points of view, it appeared to me that the appropriate thing to do was let the historic board have their input, let the planning commission have their input, and then put it in front of the city commission. And if the city commission says we're going to leave it just like it is, fine. There won't be any parking in the right of way, and whatever parking for those people who don't have side or rear yards would have to be in the street. I guess the complications were illustrated when someone applied to put a parking spot, so to speak, parallel to their driveway along River Street. Well, they have a driveway that leads to a carport, but they wanted to put a parking pad adjacent to the driveway. Literal interpretation of the code says you can't park in the front yard. And that was the literal interpretation that I initially made. And then I was told, Okay, but the house right next door has one, has a parking spot, which is a continuation of the driveway, but adjacent to it. And so it's right next door. So at that point, it appeared to me as though a lot of things have been done over time. I can't change what's been done in the past. I can't, and I'm not going to take credit or blame for it, but I can try to start fresh with enforcing whatever code the city commission intends to adopt. So that's why the staff basically articulated some options. I had already begun, before everything kind of erupted, I had already begun kind of drafting a proposed ordinance. It is a blueprint. It still is a blueprint. It wasn't intended to be, the end all, be all, or the only option. It was an option which staff thought might be a compromise, in that it essentially says that if you don't have the capability of parking in your side yard or your rear yard, and since front yard parking is prohibited, then the Board of Zoning Appeals, after getting input from the Historic Preservation Board at the properties in the historic district, can grant a variance. It provides for a variance for a single parking space, not to exceed 10 by 20, of a composition and material that the board deems appropriate, whether that be pavers, concrete, whatever, taking into account the character of the neighborhood. So this, when people start talking about changing the ordinance, this is the change that I assume they're talking about. It hasn't been, of course, put on any agenda. As I said, it's a draft, it's a working model. And if it's something that the city commission or the various boards choose to favor, then great. If it's not, as I said, our intent is only to obtain clarification. But there is a need for clarification, because technically, if you get right down to it, the Green Gables parking slot isn't authorized by our code either. There's nothing in the code that says you can grant a conditional use for something that the code doesn't say can be granted by conditional use. And that particular use went before a board and a conditional use was granted, and they include a parking spot. But technically, there's nothing in our code that gave them the right to include a parking spot in the right of way by conditional use. So again, that's a situation where I guess, it was thought that somebody was doing what was reasonable, but it's not technically in compliance with the code. So we just want clarification. And however it goes, as I said, my car's going to be parked tonight where it was parked last night, and it'll be parked after all this dust settles. It'll still be parked where it was parked last night. It's not a personal matter to me. It's simply a matter of getting consistency and then applying the rule consistently. That's all we see. So I'll answer questions if I can, if you have any. Otherwise, I'm here for you guys to discuss.
I have a question. So there's no on-street parking in a historical district?
On street?
On street.
There's nothing that prohibits it, to the best of my knowledge. I haven't seen that.
There's nothing.
So there's nothing that prohibits
So
it.
you can park on the street, you can have a driveway.
Yep.
But you can't park in the grass in the front yard.
Nope.
And what is the right of way? Is that the part between the street?
Travel way and the property line. Mhm. Between the travel way and the property line. So you got a curve.
When you call it travel, you mean the street.
Right.
And the property line,
Yeah.
which is on the other side of the sidewalk.
Correct. Well, I assume it is. If it's
So
a
we're calling
sidewalk.
that, but it's like the buffering zone.
It's a right of way.
Okay. So what you're proposing is that if you have a driveway, you can add another driveway next to it in the yard
That wasn't what I proposed. What the ordinance in
with a
front of you,
variance.
what the ordinance in front of you simply states is that you can park in the right of way if you don't have a driveway and you don't have a side or rear yard.
So you can park between the curb and the sidewalk
Yes, sir.
on the grass.
Well, no, sir. It says that you do this by requesting permission from the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they would then authorize a single spot, not more than 10 by 20, of a composition that was appropriate to the neighborhood. So it wouldn't be just grass, it'd be either whatever they said.
So it'd be next to the curb, not in their yard.
Correct, next to the curb.
Okay, so you can't add a spot in the yard.
No, sir.
And if you add a spot next to the curb, you're gonna have to surface it somehow.
That's correct.
And you're going to have to get approval.
And you're
And
gonna
get approval, right?
That's true.
But you can park on the street.
Sir,
Yes.
You can park on the street all you want.
All day long.
sure can.
Okay, that's all I want to
You
know.
bought the street, I guess. Well, I guess at that point we'd have a problem, but I guess theoretically, if you park side to side, one each direction on a 16-foot street, two cars at what? Probably will make it difficult, well, you make it impossible for somebody to drive through, but
What-
you can do it.
My question would be, why is this a blanket thing for all of Palaca, including the historic districts? Why aren't the historic districts somehow taken out of the mix? We've never allowed right-of-way parking in the historic district, to my knowledge.
You have it in the historic district, to my knowledge, you just don't do it, in a designated spot. And, you know, if you're asking me if it's possible to tailor an ordinance only to the historic district, sure it would be.
I mean, okay,
I mean.
and you're right, point taken. On the south side, there have been areas created, and Grand Gables is a great example of it. In the north side, not so much. If someone is parked in the right of way, they shouldn't be there because
No, there's nothing that, if you're asking, is it possible to tailor an ordinance only to a historic district? The answer is yes, it's possible to do that. I mean, we're talking about adopting a law or an ordinance, and particularly if the circumstances or the conditions of the district are kind of unique. Meaning, you know, you've got houses that are older that were built at a time when, you know, things were different, vehicular traffic was different, number of cars were different, all that kind of thing. Then, you know, there may very well be a logical reason for a different provision that applies to the historic district than to the rest of the city. Certainly, I agree, that's reasonable to think.
well, I mean, I guess as a resident of the north side, I see a couple of different problems. When you begin to say, well, you know what, parking in the right of way is no longer an issue. How about the water lines? Good grief. Park on top of the meter and.
That's why we say, and if you look at that ordinance, you'll see that the criteria of we do have a variance procedure in Palaca. And it has criteria that have to be met in order for the variance to be granted. One of those is that the granting of the variance does not interfere with or adversely affect the health, safety, or welfare of the public. So that would be one of those considerations that if you sought permission to put a parking pad in, that'd be something that would have to be talked about. Where's the water line? Where are the utilities? You know, and is it okay to put something there without being, and are you going to interfere with those in the process? So that's why the process is as it is. And that's why in that proposed ordinance, there are conditions. You know, it has to be, this doesn't allow carte blanche parking in the right of way. It says it has to be for residential, single family residential structure or residential structure that doesn't have the availability of parking to the side or rear. And then you have to meet it can only be one pad, 10 by 20 in size. And it has to go in front of the zoning board of appeal. And if it's or board of zoning appeals, and if it's an historic district, it has to come before the preservation board first, so that you provide input to the board of zoning appeal. Those are, maybe an arduous process, but essentially the bottom line is there'll only be 3 houses in the south side historic district that would qualify. And everybody else would be left to what they've got now, if this were granted. But as I told you, this is just a draft, and you can change the words just as easily as I wrote the words.
Well, that would be my next question. I mean, certainly we're not meant to even really have the time to basically more than glance at this.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I understand.
I don't know very many households that only have one car. So we're talking 2 at least. Is that written in?
No. I guess at some point, I was trying to split the baby, trying to compromise, and we're already getting pushback on having any parking spaces in the right of way. So for me to provide for unlimited parking spaces seemed like a stretch. So I put the 10 by 20 in there, and hoping that was going to accomplish something. But again, if it's thought that you should allow more than one parking pad, I mean, whatever that thought process is, your input is what we're looking for.
Being a resident of the North Historic District for, I guess, 16 years coming on now, I just can't support right-of-way parking.
I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not arguing for it. I don't have.
No, and I don't mean to,
Yeah.
it just, the more I think about it, you know, our property on the corner, we've owned that somehow for probably 8, 9 years now. And where the former people that live there parked on the right of way, we still have dirt. You know, we can't actually get grass to grow there. But, you know, on top of that, aesthetically in a historic district, which is why I asked about, you know, the whole blanket of Palatka as compared to the historic districts. It's just not aesthetically pleasing.
Well, and I think that's kind of getting into the discussion, which it wasn't my intent really to participate in. We brought this here for your input. And, you know, if y'all reach a consensus on what your opinion is, then you'll voice that. And we'll take that to the next step, the planning commission, and then it'll ultimately go to the city commission. And whatever they say, for instance, if the city commission says, basically, we're going to leave it just like it is. There's no parking in the right of way. And the parking will remain with no parking in the front yard.
So all we're doing today is discussing allowing a variance.
You're discussing the issue of accommodating parking in the right of way.
Allowing people to apply for that right to do.
Right.
You know, a lot of people have families and they have more than one vehicle. I don't care where you're at. You know?
Yeah.
And I don't like it when a few people dictate that, never mind, I'm not gonna get into that, but, so all we're discussing is our opinion on that. That's all we're doing.
That's right.
And it won't be brought, it's gonna be another board meeting, before this is brought to the city commission, probably, right?
The planning commission will have to consider it because it involves a change
Right, okay.
of our regulations.
I think part of the problem is educating what those laws are, existing laws. Because you see people parking in front lawns on, even the other day I saw maybe 10 cars parked on the sidewalk. One right after other, because there wasn't any other parking. And it really does make our town look bad. But if we can't enforce it, or if people don't understand that it's not legal, then that's where part of the problem lies. That's not our jurisdiction, but.
Well, no, it's a
Just
fair
saying.
comment. It's a fair comment. So, I understand.
When you're dealing with a street that is 16 feet wide, I would again imagine that you're probably talking about a historic district for the most part.
For the most part, I would agree.
Okay. How many times does it actually happen when 2 cars parked on the street and therefore completely block the street? Is this common?
I haven't seen, I've lived in the South Historic District for
On Kirby.
14 years. I haven't seen it happen too often. I mean, it doesn't, on a holiday or an event, possible, but not generally speaking.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a question for Mr. Holmes. The existing ordinance, that the 94-261, what is the enforcement of that? Did I misunderstand you at the beginning of your presentation saying that this is not a code enforcement issue? Who does enforcement of the existing ordinance?
No, I said that this is not a code enforcement meeting. The intent of this meeting isn't it to talk about the fact that Palatka needs to start enforcing its codes. We understand Palatka needs to try to start enforcing its codes. There's a practical consideration with us gearing up a code enforcement department, and then even after we have it geared up, there's going to be a practical consideration with how many cases we can handle. We have, I'll tell you, made arrangements to work with a magistrate this coming year, as the county does, in order to eliminate some of the issues we've had with the code enforcement board. We're not eliminating that board, but we've had issues with not being able to make a quorum on time from time to time and not being able to hold hearings. So we're going to try to address that by having a magistrate, just as the county does. And we're going to have a working code enforcement office. But as I indicated, code enforcement department, but as I indicated, there's just a matter of it's just a matter of basically labor and time and what cases we're able to deal with. So obviously, if we're dealing with if we have a life safety complaint and we have somebody parking on the sidewalk, the odds are the life safety complaint is going to be the one that gets addressed if we only have time to address one. And I think that almost anyone would understand that. So in terms of there is no particular enforcement provision. There's not a specific separate enforcement provision in the code that I read. It would be just as all other codes. It would be enforced by the same penalty and sanction methodology that applies to all of the codes, and that would be through code enforcement. There might also be a possibility of writing citations for those types of violations.
And it would
Okay,
be
that was,
it would be complaint driven, where somebody would have to file a code.
Yes, ma'am. Again, the fact of life is that if we just try to go out and start picking out types of cases to enforce, the first complaint we get is, well, you're picking on this, but you've got these other types of cases over here you're not dealing with. So that's just a whole different argument that we'd have to deal with. So what we do is we operate on a complaint-driven basis. If somebody complains about an issue, then that issue is one that we put in our hopper to try to address. So yes, in answer to your question, it's complaint-driven.
okay. So just to clarify my question, the existing ordinance is a code enforcement. It would be them that would be involved, not the Palatka Police Department. And is the proposed ordinance that you just passed out have the same language as far as enforcement is concerned?
The ordinance that I passed out does not change any of the enforcement provisions. And I don't mean to tell you, Larry, that the Palatka Police Department couldn't issue citations, because it's very possible that on a parking violation, that they could issue violations or citations. So I didn't mean to tell you that they could not be involved. But your first statement was accurate in that I believe it would be a code enforcement issue as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead,
as a board member, I truly don't feel like I have enough information to
make a recommendation from the board.
pretty much. I mean, I know what my gut feeling is on right-of-way parking as a resident of the North Historic District. I feel as though, you know, and I realize you're saying that the city of Palatka is not leading us in any particular direction. So going somewhere else than saying, I don't feel like the system is broken currently. I like it the way it is. You don't park on the right-of-way, is pretty much all I keep coming back to.
Well, that's the discussion for you to have. I'm not trying to argue that point at all. I mean, the whole idea of this was to get input. I'm not here to sell this ordinance. I put something together because anytime you start talking about, you know, suggested changes, it's helpful to have specific suggested changes for people to talk about. So I put this together, and that's all it is to it. So I'm not trying to sell it. I'm not trying to get you to adopt it or anything of that nature. Right? It's for discussion purposes.
And thank
We'll
you
come
for,
back. I was going to say, unless you have any other questions on Mr.
thank you for doing that. One thing we've found from experience is that when we make one exception, then that opens up a whole can of worms for other people. As you said, you know, well, that you're picking on us, but
They're allowed to do it.
right.
And that was exactly what I was trying to. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll sit down unless you have other questions.
Okay. Do we have any of the staff that want to make comments of any sort? Go to public.
Thank you.
Well, not public. Before we go to board comments.
I think that the ordinance that are in place are good. We just need to enforce the ones that we have.
I have a comment.
Okay.
When we get to my comment.
We will in a minute, Mr. Russo. Thank you.
Well, and again, one of the things that is so frustrating, especially in the historic districts, is, you know, you can make all the rules you want, but unless someone is there to enforce them, they're really pointless anyway. So I applaud the city's intention to get code enforcement back on track. think that's awesome.
Okay, any public comments?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I have a.
Please come up and give your name and address for the record in 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Just three?
Just three.
Just
No
three.
5,
Hi,
3.
my name is Vito Russo. I live at 415 Emmett Street. I'm not even sure why this is even an issue. We've been parking in the right of way since the invention of automobiles. This has been going on for 100 years. So this has become an issue because of some people making an issue of it. Pam Garris being one of them. Where does Pam Garris have standing in our community? She doesn't even live here. Doesn't even live here. Does she have property here? I don't think so. So I like to power up this PowerPoint and get to a few points. So code enforcement in general, we can skip the first couple of them and go right to the ones that are most relevant. So if we could just skip, if we could just skip through the first few of them.
Keep going.
Yeah, keep going. Keep going. So this code 261, 94-261. Please keep going.
Next.
Next one. All right. Driveway aprons to nowhere. That is in code 94-261. But those have been poured by the city. So just move forward to the next slide. Next slide. So that right there, that is the third driveway apron for that residence. The third one poured in the middle of the right of way to allow parking in the front yard. Let's go to the next one. That one is the second driveway apron for Jan and Jeff. And that is the parking in the front yard also. So why this off-street parking is becoming an issue because of a few chosen people, I'm not sure. It's never been enforced. This code was established in like 1980. Well, this is 40 years later. It's never been enforced. So off-street parking has actually been promoted by the city because they had a right-of-way permit. I have the form. The right-of-way permit was going to allow me to have pavers put in the right-of-way so I could park in the right-of-way. So this is an example. This is flipped through them. This is all the right-of-way parking that we currently have and that we've had for decades and decades. They're all over the place. They're all over. That's Dodge Street. Okay, so this is Tony Harwell. He's making a big issue of this when he himself parks in the right of way almost every single day.
Don't have to yell.
Almost every single day. Let's just go through the next couple of pictures. This is a different picture every single day that Tony Harwell is parking in the right of way, and yet he's making a big issue of this. Why is that? So, I mean, there it is, another day. Okay, so off-street parking is much preferable to on-street parking. Because if you have a substrate and it's landscaped, next picture, please, like the Grand Gables, now, how is that not preferable to a D curb and then being forced to park on the street on a 16-foot wide street? Let's go to the next one. So this is my house. This is mine. The city was absolutely generous and kind to offer to pour that for me. And I accepted, and they did it. And they were going to do 2 more. But Mr. Harwell started making an issue of it. Mrs. Pam Garris started making the issue of it. Now, I started to landscape that. And that's not finished because I stopped halfway through because of these issues that have been brought to my attention. So how is that not preferable to a D curb and being forced to park on the street? Now, this picture you see here with me changing my water.
Excuse me, you need to wrap it up, please. Your time's up.
So this picture right here is me changing my water pump on my truck. Now, this is a lame argument. I'm supposed to do that in the street. That's better.
Thank you.
So you can just, basically, we should be allowed to have a substrate or off-street parking because it's much more aesthetic. Don's even pointed this out.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Chair, Tony Harwell's on line 1.
Okay. Excuse me. Little backflash. Flashback. See how long Excuse me, are you there, Mr. Howell? Mr. Howell?
Hello,
Hi. Please give your name and address for the record. 3 minutes.
Tony Harwell, 215 Dodge Street.
Go ahead.
Okay, just for the record, my vehicle was not in any of those photographs.
His wife?
Well, my name was mentioned anyway. You have a diagram in front of you, and this might want to be verified by Mr. Holmes, but there's a diagram of two different typical layouts of the property. And in that diagram, it shows where you're not allowed to park in the front yard. And basically what it is, and this is just for your information, is what is termed as required yard and front yard are two different things. Your required yard or required front yard is the required yard that you have to build a setback to. In other words, it's a front setback. And you can't park anywhere or build anything in that setback. That's your full required yard. You are allowed to, as far as I understand the code and have interpreted many codes around Florida, you're allowed to park in your front yard, just not in the required yard. And you're required to park in your side yard, your backyard. Anyway, some of the other things that I discussed before during the public portion have to do with the three options that you're given, which I'm not for any of them. And that is the terminology is just not right. It's going to open up a whole can of worms with the municipal code. And that is, the statement says, in general, prohibit parking in the street, but where the construction, location, and site plan of the home leaves it impossible to get to the backyard, and the home does not have a garage, allow the residents to have a single parking pad. Now, impossible to get back to the backyard. Well, that doesn't say, there's nothing in the municipal code that says that you have to be able to get to your backyard or that you have to have a garage. You start throwing those things into the code, then that's going to throw a monkey wrench in everything. Everybody's going to pull that out. And the other thing is that even if this is citywide, and you're building a new home and you build to your setback, you're automatically able to park in the right of way and put a pad there. I'm against it 100%. It wasn't broke until the city changed the roads, and they changed the configuration of the roads. They changed a lot of little recesses in the roads that people would park at, including one of the houses in question on Kirkland. Single residence. They used to have a
Excuse me, Mr. Harwell, you really have to wrap it up.
Okay, you used to have an apron across the street, but that's where all the bricks got stolen. Anyway, there's three houses in question. One of the ones is on Kirkland, and as soon as they move the pole, they'll have the ability to park. The other one is 513 Emmett, and that's just a bad case. The other one is on Kirkland, which is an apartment building, and there's never been a problem there. Everybody parks in the back or on the adjacent property. There's never been a question. This is something that somebody came up with because they wanted to have their own personal pad out in front of their house. It's going to cost the city money when they start digging these things up to do service, and it's just a mess. And I'm against it totally, and I think a lot of other people are too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
any city comments or back at that, or we just want to leave it alone?
No, ma'am, I have no additional comments.
Okay, no additional comments. Okay, what's the thought of the board? As far as recommendations, suggestions, or anything?
I don't know enough to.
For allowing people that don't have to apply for a parking spot that they might need.
Okay, so we have a mixed, kind of a mixed response here.
Again, I've been fairly honest about how I feel about right-of-way parking, but by the same token, I mean, does Larry Beaton have a copy of this? I certainly haven't had a chance to read it.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
we don't want to rush. you
Okay,
into it.
so, okay, so we can come back. Okay.
You
Ponder,
want to
come
take
back.
this and think about it, and then we can call another meeting,
Okay,
and then you have an opportunity to,
sounds like a good plan.
Ma'am?
Thank you. Sounds like a good plan. Thank you.
I would like the addresses. He said 513 Emmett, and then there were two on Kirtland to drive by.
Correct. The one on Kirkland is in the 200 block of Kirkland, and the other's in the 300 block. It's a multifamily. I don't know. I can look up the numbers.
Okay.
I don't know. I know where the houses are.
We can email you those addresses
Okay,
if
thank
you'd
you.
like to the entire
Thank you.
board, the
Thank
three
you.
addresses that we felt were going to be qualifying.
Thank you.
Sure. Sonny, can you take care of that for me? John?
Okay, Ms. Fisher, who we didn't even introduce, by the way. Could you please introduce yourself since we didn't even do that before we adjourn?
Hello, Bernadette Fisher, the Department of Building and Planning.
Oh, we couldn't hear you.
Good afternoon. I'm Bernadette Fisher with the Department of Building and Planning, and I've been here for a few weeks now.
Welcome to Palatka.
Welcome. Don't let this deter you.
Oh, Richard. Okay. Anything else? Do we want to adjourn, folks? Have a motion to adjourn?
Do we need a motion to table?
Do we need a motion to table or do we just want to adjourn? I
We would have
guess.
heard to table it.
Okay, let's have a motion to table, please.
I'd like to make a motion to table until we have more information.
Okay, we have a motion to table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any particular information that you're seeking from staff?
Besides those addresses, is there anything else specifically? Or do you want to email it and I'll send it to staff? Do that. Okay. Let them think about it a bit.
Okay, sure.
I will get it to you.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.